School choice, rural hospitals, voter access. The 2026 Mississippi Legislature will impact you and your family for years to come. MPB brings you At Issue, a weekly analysis of the legislative session and the issues affecting you with perspectives from both sides of the aisle. Brandon Jones and new At Issue analyst Rebecca Staples join me, Wilson Stribling, every Monday at 5 p.m. only on MPB Think Radio and wherever you get your podcasts. MPB, your stories, our mission.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bobby Rush. As a blues man, I love Mississippi Public Broadcasting. If you support Mississippi music and their local programming, donate now, right now, and become a member today, not tomorrow. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Doesn't matter how big or small, but we prefer big. Thank you very much.
Good Wednesday afternoon, Mississippi. You have found the sit down right here on Mississippi Public Broadcasting Radio, where we explore the ideas and the people that are shaping Mississippi's future. It is a new year, which means we're on at a new time. Gone is 10 a.m. Hello is 4 p.m. I'm looking forward to the slot. It's better slot, closer to drive time. People leaving the office, maybe want to get a little informed, want to think about things a little differently as they get done with a long and busy day. And so we'll be glad to do that. We're going to talk about the legislative session that is just started. Certainly some big bills already hopping, lots of controversy already, people at each other's throats. So we'll dig into some of that in a bit. But before we get there, we'll talk about something a little less controversial. I think the entire state of Mississippi, even people who don't like Ole Miss, Mississippi State fans or Southern fans, are coming around and rallying behind the Ole Miss Rebels as they make a run deep into the college football playoffs. We are joined by the one and only, the mouth of the South. I just came up with that, but we're going to stick with it. Blake Levine. Blake, I understand you're headed out to Phoenix to see the Rebels play the Miami Hurricanes.
Yeah, not as a media guy. I'm going to be sitting in the crowd with the fans. I haven't even bought my ticket yet because the prices actually keep going down. That's actually a good thing for me. So I wanted to be, I didn't want to be I just kind of wanted to watch it from afar and just have fun and go there. And I had a friend that said he wanted to go, and I said, all right, I'm there.
Awesome. So here's something that maybe the radio audience, to the extent that they've listened to the program, have figured out about me. I'm a glass half full guy. I'm a little Eeyore-ish, generally speaking. I tend to look at things as what's the worst thing that can happen, not what's the best thing that can happen. And so, having watched Ole Miss football for most of my life, there's a part of me that wants to set the expectation low, that wants to say, the same way I did with Georgia. I was like, there's no way we're going to beat Georgia. And then we did, and I got to be on cloud nine, Blake. There's a part of me going, there's no way we're going to beat Miami. How does Ole Miss match up against the Miami Hurricanes? What do you think is going to happen out there tomorrow night in the desert?
Okay. I'm not saying it's a better chance that they win, but it's a better matchup for them, right? Because when it came to Georgia, I have this saying, and other people have this saying, I didn't coin this, but if two great teams play twice in one season, I'm going to take the team that lost the first time. And that's why I bet my mustache that Ole Miss was going to win. And the same reason that we saw Alabama beat Oklahoma in the playoffs, the same reason we saw Georgia then beat Alabama in the SEC championship game. When two great teams play, I'll take the team that lost the first time, which is why I felt even though they were 6.5-point dogs, Ole Miss was going to win this game because Ole Miss is a great team. Now, when they play Tulane a second time, we're talking about a great team versus a good team. The saying and the feeling doesn't go the same way. Miami, they have not played yet, so you can't take they lost earlier in the year. Maybe I would have taken Notre Dame over Miami the second time. But the point being is that this is a better matchup. Miami is the number 10 seed. Georgia was the number 3 seed. I don't know why there is this perception just because they're one round further that for some reason Miami's a better football team than Georgia. Georgia is a better football team than Miami. However, Ole Miss cannot make those same mistakes they made in the first half, or else they're going to lose this game to Miami because Miami's not a team you can fall behind. Georgia's defense was a lot weaker to me than Miami's, although Georgia's offense is a lot better than Miami's. So there's that kind of thing. But the reason that I think Ole Miss wins this game is what makes Miami so good is one, their offense and defensive line, and then they can run the ball. But start with that defensive line. They rush the passer. They're not as good against the run. If Ole Miss can take a 2-score lead at any point early in the second half, late in the second quarter, they make that pass rush not as effective because they're going to be able to run the ball. 2, having Trinidad Chambliss allows for, some of those plays where it would have been a sack against Julian Sayin. It helps because Trinidad Chambliss is going to break the tackle there once or twice. I mean, sometimes he's going to get sacked. And I think they take that lead. And Carson Beck, the last time he played Ole Miss, he threw 3 picks. So putting them in a must-pass situation would be deadly for Miami.
Yeah, so a lot of people were hoping for that Georgia-Miami matchup that Ole Miss ruined. Maybe the referees were hoping for it a little bit in the Sugar Bowl as well, that they were looking for that Georgia-Miami matchup because of the Carson Beck story. Obviously, Carson Beck played at Georgia where Ole Miss was able to beat him last year. He had a very bad performance in that game. And now he's got him in a position to potentially take them home for a national championship game. That's a big storyline. It's probably why there are tickets going for $28,000.
Can I say something real quick about that, Russ?
Sure. That's why you're on.
What's a better story? Ole Miss with the Lane Kiffin and the Chambliss waiver and the Chambliss year, the transfer portal and all that, or Carson Beck playing Miami again? What's a better story?
Well,
what's a more interesting story?
At least for folks in Mississippi, the answer is the Ole Miss story.
I think it's bigger nationally. I think it's bigger nationally.
Yeah, I think Ole Miss, I led with saying that the Rebels had sort of become Mississippi's team, at least temporarily. And I say that knowing that right now there is a Bulldogs fan, shaking his fist at the sky at that idea. But I think most of Mississippi kind of wants to see Ole Miss succeed. I also think that you're right, that there's an element of the national media has been so hard on Lane Kiffin and so critical of what happened with him leaving that I believe that Ole Miss at some level has become the nation's team or the easy Cinderella story. You've got the Trinidad Chambliss thing, all of that, right?
Yeah, I think Indiana and Ole Miss. I think they're pretty Ole Miss for a different reason. I mean, look, again, we talk about we're in Mississippi, so it's a little bit different covering Mississippi. Indiana story is pretty crazy when you really think about it. That was a bad program. That is not a historically okay program. That's a historically bad program that has this really fun, and Mendoza seems like just such a nice, humble kid. I think their story is pretty good. I think the Indiana Ole Miss national championship would be the most, underdoggy, friendly, national championship where it's two, fun-loving stories. There's not the big bad Ohio State.
Yeah, so here's a question for you, because I've been thinking about this matchup a lot. I mean, you're right that if you look at Miami's offensive line, you look at Miami's defensive line, there's NFL talent there, particularly on the defense line. Their edge rushers are elite against the pass. Certainly if Q and Lacey can have a good game, he can neutralize some of that. But if you look at the Miami-Ohio State matchup, the question that's been in the back of my mind is Miami that good that they kind of manhandled Ohio State? Or was Ohio State a little overrated in the course of this season as well?
No, I think Ohio State played a really bad half, and it cost them. Because you got to remember in that game, they're about to score, and they throw the pick six. If they don't throw that pick six and they get a touchdown there, Ohio State's winning that game. We're talking about a play in the second quarter being the difference between Ohio State winning and losing that game. And yes, I'd say it's that one play where they get the pick six and then they're down 17-7, I think it was, at half. You got to remember, also, Miami only scored 7 points in the second half, and it was that late touchdown to put the game out of reach. Ohio State was shutting them out in the second half, and Ohio State then outscored them in the second half. I think Ohio State just played a bad half. That's why I'm telling people Miami's not as good as Georgia. If Ole Miss plays an A game, they are a better team. They are the better football team on any given Saturday. That doesn't mean that they win this week. It just means on any given Saturday, the law of averages, Ole Miss wins this game.
And Miami's one loss was to SMU?
And Louisville.
And who else did they lose to?
Louisville.
Louisville and SMU.
No, NC State, right? I think it was NC State.
Okay.
It was one of those two. I know
the Ponies were part of it, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So
right.
that's certainly not as good of a loss if you're comparing like the Georgia loss earlier in the season at Georgia. Um,
Yeah.
let me ask you this: you're going out there. What is your expectation of what Trinidad Chambliss is going to do against Miami's defense? What is your expectation of what Q and Lacey can do against Miami's defense?
This has to be more of a Lacey game to me. I think they got a ground and pound. I want to see that kid get 30 carries. Yes, that 3-0. That's a lot. But that kid can handle it. I want to see 30 carries. And if you want to split it up a little bit, Diggs gets, 7 and he gets 23. I need to see 30 carries, and then, maybe into that 40 range of carries, combined, and maybe, sorry, my math's a little off. 30 from Lacey, maybe 10 from Diggs. You're talking about 40 carries. They got to do that. Chambliss has to make the plays when, he's called upon, because I don't think they're going to drop him back like they did against Georgia and have him run around. The defensive ends are a lot better for Miami in that case. And again, I just want to give you a fun point. Ole Miss has led in every single fourth quarter this season. That's when I say Ole Miss is one of the best teams in the nation. They've led in every single fourth quarter, and they lost one game.
Yeah, they were up by 9.
That's my point
against Georgia,
yeah.
and
then
kind of fell apart a little bit.
They've pretty much only been, their butt kicked one quarter this year.
So quit hemming and hawing and give me a prediction.
Okay, Ole Miss is going to win. Ole Miss is going to win. They're going to have 31 points. Miami's going to have 21. 10 points. I'm telling you, double digits, 31-21.
And you're putting money on it, right?
Of course I am.
Well, I'm going to see you out there. We're headed out there once I'm done on the radio. You're going to get a little bit of a head start on me.
Yeah, my Uber driver's already here.
Yeah, he's waiting on you, right? So, look, the way that I looked at it was this. And it's like I've spent my whole life following something and never seeing this level of success. I'm not going to say it'll never happen again, but I'm not going to take the chance that it happens again. I'm going to go ahead and ride them until they die. And we'll see what happens, whether or not they can bring home a championship for the state of Mississippi.
Absolutely. Have fun.
Good to see you, Blake. Thanks for coming on. We'll take a brief break. We're going to come back. We're going to talk with State Senator Daniel Sparks, shifting gears from Ole Miss football to the public employees retirement system. That's an interesting transition, but we'll get it anyway. You're listening to The Sit Down. We'll be right back.
School choice, rural hospitals, voter access. The 2026 Mississippi Legislature will impact you and your family for years to come. MPB brings you At Issue, a weekly analysis of the legislative session and the issues affecting you with perspectives from both sides of the aisle. Brandon Jones and new At Issue analyst Rebecca Staples join me, Wilson Stribling, every Monday at 5 p.m. only on MPB Think Radio and wherever you get your podcasts. MPB, your stories, our mission.
You're listening to Sit Down right here on MPB Think Radio. I'm your host, Russ Latino. We are shifting gears from Ole Miss football to the wonderful world of the legislature. The legislature is back in town. They gavelled in yesterday. They've already introduced bills. There have been bills introduced related to school choice in both the Senate and the Mississippi House. Mississippi House introduced its big omnibus bill a little bit earlier today. And there also has been a bill introduced related to the public employees retirement system. And we are talking to the man that knows more about the public employees retirement system than maybe anybody in the legislature, State Senator Daniel Sparks, who was, of course, involved and instrumental in driving some reforms that passed last year that created a new Tier 5 system within PERS. It's a hot topic, particularly given the number of people that are employed in the state of Mississippi or have been employed by state and local government. And so a lot of people are always interested. There's also just a ton of misinformation that gets spread around about this. And I understand, like, what happens is, like, people naturally are fearful about, okay, there's conversation around reform. What does this mean for me, having worked the number of years that I've worked? Is this going to impact my retirement in some ways? So the concern is rational. I think sometimes people play on those fears. And so here to help us make sense of all that, like I said, is State Senator Daniel Sparks. Did I give you enough credit for your role?
Well, Russ, I appreciate the opportunity to come on with you. You know, there were a lot of people that worked on this, and the PERS committee themselves, the elected board, which is elected by these 300,000 people you're talking about that are retirees or current employees. And that board has recognized for many years that our funding shortfall, based on the way the system was set up and the way that it was modified in the 80s and 90s, with new benefits but not new funding, was ultimately going to come to a head. And so they have asked for reform. They asked for a tier 5 a year ago. They asked for a tier 5 a year before that. So I do appreciate the work they've done, because they're in a position where they are a fiduciary. They have a responsibility to their members and to the solvency of the plan, and that is their one duty. Then they hand off their recommendations to the legislature, which has an obligation to the entire state of Mississippi, taxpayers who are not in PERS, also to fund core functions of government. So, a lot of times it's not that I don't agree maybe with a suggestion or a recommendation from the PERS board. It's just that the chair of appropriations has to appropriate money for the rest of the state of Mississippi, including education, roads and bridges, public safety, and all the things that we focus on.
So what I hear you actually saying is that I gave you too much credit.
I would say there's
you would like for me to give you less credit, is what I heard.
Well, I was, when I got elected, you're told PERS, don't touch PERS. In full disclosure, my mom's a PERS retiree, public school teacher. My wife's a PERS employee. So it is personal, and it's something that it's the biggest liability of the state of Mississippi, and often the biggest problem. And part of the problem was the fear to touch. And so once you've actually reached out and tried to put your arms around it, you have to understand it first, because a lot of people have suggestions, but they've not taken the time to understand the complexity of it. The lieutenant governor put me on the PERS board. He has 2 representatives from the Senate. The House has 2 representatives. And I have dug in. I've tried to work with the board. I'm a member of the board, a non-voting member, and so I'm there. We also in 2024 made those meetings be broadcast, to be archived and streamed. So I would encourage any of your listeners and any person concerned about PERS, you can watch what's happened the last 2 years, why it's happened, and you can get the truth of it, because the actuaries are present at the meetings. The legal team for PERS are present at the meeting. I try to take all numbers from their actuaries. I don't, sit down and scribble something out on a piece of paper. I try to work with their actuaries, and we'll talk about some of that today. But the truth is, reform was needed and funding is needed, no matter what happened in the past. And we've had major reforms. We're going to continue to work on the PERS retirement system. But now we need to come forward with money. We put $110 million in 2024. We increased the employer rate 2.5% in 2024 to be phased in over 5 years. And we reformed a program called ORP, which will deliver more money to the system. And this year we looked at cash infusion in a large amount.
So I think, you made the point that the tier 5 recommendation actually started with the PERS board. And they have been making a series of recommendations around what they believe is necessary in order to get the program solvent again. Help the audience understand why the PERS board made those recommendations, why the legislature felt like it had to take it up last year. I guess what I'm asking is give the extent of the problem that you're trying to solve.
Yeah, the PERS program has 35 billion, maybe 36 now based on returns last year, of assets under management. They manage those. They anticipate a return in the markets that they invest. They have a diversified portfolio team of professionals that do that. And they have payouts annually based on people's retirement numbers. And we're paying more out than we're taking in. So anytime a system has a negative cash flow, you have to look and see how much money do you have. So with 35 billion under management, checks are coming. The system is solvent in the sense of we continue to move on the path we're moving, making our investment returns. The concern is obviously, what if you have negative market years? What if you have a 2008 recession? And that's one of the things that's played into this. We were hurt just like other pension plans. But the big problem was in the 80s and in the 90s, the legislature voted additional benefits that were not paid. PERS is supposed to be pay as you go. It's supposed to be a prepaid program. And for whatever reason, some of which I'm sure were very noble and proper, they increased benefits for people who are already retired. So they'd already paid their contribution. And so to a great degree, they gave a benefit that wasn't funded. Well, the system was 90% or so funded. And then we moved through 1990 and then to 1999. And the legislature instituted the 3% compounded COLA, once again, made it retroactive, people that hadn't paid for it. And we rolled forward. Well, today, that COLA check is close to $1 billion that we have to cut every December. Now, I will be real clear. The employees have done nothing wrong. They have worked. They had an agreement with the state. It's a contract. So we owe it. I've never wanted to say you balance the books by changing the benefits against people who've already earned their retirement. Not going to do that. So the only other way you can do it is to put more money in it and to stop the bleeding going forward. So we moved to, as recommended by the PERS board, to a hybrid retirement plan that has part defined benefit, traditional, and part defined contribution. The debt last year was $26.5 billion. The state of Mississippi takes in about $7.5 billion in revenues. So you can see how that's the largest liability by far on the books of the state of Mississippi. And so we need to do something. And so with the Tier 5 reforms, and I want to be very clear because there's actually a misinformation out there that now that the employee's contribution is split between a defined benefit plan and their own personal 401k style plan, that less money is going to PERS to pay off the unfunded liability. That's actually inaccurate. There was a message sent out today by one of the most active advocacy groups, and either they don't understand Tier 5, which is a great possibility, or they're intentionally stirring fear with their people. But I can tell you this, and I'm going to use a visual aid. This is the July 17, 2025 letter from PERS actuaries. That's Kavanaugh McDonald. That's the people hired by PERS, who lay out very clearly that it's a 1.89% more going to pay off the UAL from the Tier 5 payroll. So that's actually patently false. And they even go further to use the numbers in millions. And unfortunately, my screen is probably got the blur
blurry
on you. But in 2027, it's $4 million more dollars. And it grows exponentially. In 2034, it's $73 million. In 2047, it's $201 million. So anybody who says Tier 5 puts less money to pay off the UAL is actually saying the actuaries of PERS are wrong. So that's false. The second thing that's out there is now talking about the defined contribution, how that money's going to a private entity. No, it's not. It's going to PERS, who holds it in trust for the employee. Now, deferred comp exists already. And there's a company who I believe is named Empower, who you use to manage your assets in deferred comp. So all these Tier 1 through 4 people are probably already familiar with this process. It'll be the same process for Tier 5. And the PERS board chose to use this same company because they already knew them. They'll put it out for an RFP, I'm sure, in the future. They charge a nominal fee, as I understand it, to have the account set up with them. But no money, no PERS money is going to some private entity. One of the things that is also misleading is people compare this to Social Security. Unlike Social Security, PERS has never been touched by the Mississippi legislature, to my understanding, to take one dime out of it. And then yesterday we passed out of committee, and today we passed on the floor $1 billion of funding, $500 million as of July 1st, 2027, $50 million for the next 10 years, a total of $1 billion of cash infusion to go to PERS to help stabilize the system. So between what we did in 2024, we put $110 million in. We raised the employer contribution rate, which will be $186 million a year when it gets fully implemented. $1 billion that we are appropriating over the next 11 years, and the ORP reform. This legislature, who, by the way, inherited the $26 billion debt, we didn't do anything to cause that. That was caused prior, inaction of prior legislators. That will be $3 billion this legislature will have committed in new funding to PERS. So reform was necessary. We did that. Funding is also necessary. We're doing that and continuing to work with people in the PERS community to say, what is the best retirement plan that we can offer that we are paying for? Because I said it today on the floor. The easiest thing politically to do is do what they did in 1999. Promise a benefit in an election year, by the way, Russ. Promise a benefit, not pay for it, and leave the tab for somebody else. Well, we're the somebody else. This $1 billion we're spending, we could spend on roads and bridges and infrastructure and in our districts, but we're taking the strong position and commitment to PERS so that a future generation doesn't have to make those decisions.
Yeah, it's always an interesting debate. I mean, I have said for years around PERS, and I've been talking about this now really since the Barber Commission, when Governor Barber was in office, and some of these recommendations were made then in order to try to shore up a system that wasn't as bad off as it is now, is that at some level you got to fund it and you got to fix it, right? It's sort of what you were alluding to earlier. There is a $25 billion plus unfunded liability spread out over a number of years. And all that really means is that over a certain period of time, the system is going to take in $25 billion less than what is required to pay the people that have already been made commitments to, right? So if you want to honor those commitments, you got to figure out a way to fill that hole. There's no way to magically make that up through reforms. More money's got to be put in. But to your point, you also have to stop the bleeding. You've got to make sure that this does not continually occur such that unfunded liability grows and grows and grows, and then you have an economic downturn, and suddenly you're in a really, really hard jam with taking care of folks. I guess I'm curious, though, like for those of us that are in the private sector, that are not in the public employee retirement system, and we hear things like, between the employee contribution and the employer contribution, 30% of their income, is going towards a retirement fund. Those numbers seem astronomical. And as a taxpayer, a private sector taxpayer, there's a part of me that goes, gosh, it kind of feels like the private sector taxpayers are getting taken for a ride in this process too. We're not the ones that are mad, but how do you respond to that?
Well, I think, first of all, when the state of Mississippi signs its name in an obligation, the state of Mississippi has to meet it. You don't bankrupt yourself out of a pension plan. I think taxpayers should be upset that prior legislators, and we have a lot of people that comment on PERS, and some of those people sat in the very seats that we sat in today and did nothing. So they made the problem worse. One of the other things that comes into play, and this is where I look at principles, foundation, and funding, not chasing the actuarial numbers, because when I got to the legislature in 2020, the unfunded liability was $20 billion. You say, well, gosh, did they lose $6 billion? No. The actuaries recommended lowering the future assumed rate of return, assumed, not actual, and they lowered it from 7.75 to 7 in 2 years. That inflated, that raised the liability on paper. Nobody lost money. We made 11.71% on assets last year. We made 10.34% on assets the year before that. Our 30-year average is about 8.13, but the board adopted and the actuaries recommended to go to 7%. So that has artificially inflated the liabilities. So is there a real problem there because of the actions of the 80s and 90s legislature that they didn't pay for? Yes, and we're trying to chip away at that. My hope is the actuaries are being overly conservative. And what they did in 2017, they chose, and the board adopted a funding policy, to pick 30 years, arbitrary date, we're going to be 100% funded. So sometimes when they say you're not funding it enough, it's not that you're not funding it. It's that they chose a payoff date. And by the way,
so Senator Sparks, we are up against a break.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But I'm going to have you back on because I know this is an important issue, obviously an issue that's going to be talked about throughout the legislative session. I know both the House and the Senate have their own sort of working systems around this issue. It'll be interesting to see where everything comes together. I think you both have made a commitment to try and fund it more, which is good news for people in the system. I think you're also trying to be responsible with it. So definitely appreciate your time and the work that you guys have put in on it, and we'll have you back.
Thank you. And this is a clean funding bill. Nothing else in it. Doesn't change the program. It's just money like we promised.
Talking with Senator Daniel Sparks about PERS. We're going to take a brief break. When we come back, we'll shift gears, talk about some of the other issues that will be coming up this legislative session that you can look out for. You're listening to The Sit Down with Russ Latino. We will be right back.
Together through the years. Together in the future. MPB, your stories, our mission.
You're listening to The Sit Down right here on MPB Think Radio. I'm your host, Russ Latino. Two good guests to start the program out, to start the new year out on our new time slot. Same bat program, different bat time. Same bat station, I suppose. We're glad to have you with us in this new year. It is crazy to believe how quick 2025 went. It is crazy to believe that we are in 2026, but alas, here we are. Legislative session unfolding. Lots of conversation already about what that's going to look like. Far and away, the biggest issue, the biggest debate, the thing that you're going to hear the most about is going to be different school choice proposals. And look, I will tell you at the outset of this conversation, Russ has a perspective. I'm not going to hide that from you. I know that there are people sometimes in the media, sometimes who speak on these issues that act as if they don't have a perspective. And most people come in with their own little inklings about where they'd like to see things go. So I'm not going to hide the fact that I am a general school choice fan. I like the idea of creating competition. I like the idea of giving families choice. But what I want to do today is to give you a sense of where the Senate and the House proposals are. The Senate's already passed a bill. The House just released the bill today, filed their big omnibus bill today. Give you a sense of where those bills are. Talk through a little bit some of the issues on both sides of the issue, and then commit to you that over the course of this session, we're going to have people on that really like school choice, and we're going to have people on that have serious concerns about school choice. And the hope is that we're going to have some of those people on together such that we can have real debate, real dialogue, real discussion, cut through talking points, and hopefully get to a point where people understand the issue and can make decisions for themselves. I think that's about as good as you can get. And I think during the process, I'm going to be honest with you when I have a perspective on things like this. So let's get started with what is school choice, because I think it'll be helpful to understand some of the debate that's going on right now. The underlying premise for people who support school choice is essentially that they believe that the family is the building block of society, right? Like it's the primary building block of society. And that parents should have choices in how their kids are educated because parents know their kids best. They know that, every kid's different. They know what makes theirs tick. And because of that, they're in the best position and candidly carry the responsibility to make sure that their kids get a good education. And so that's sort of the foundational concept around this idea of like, how do you give families more options when it comes to education? Recognizing that not everybody's a trust fund baby, right? Not everybody has the money to be able to send their kids to some elite private school or to make choices to move from one community to the next to access a different public school. And so that's the essence of the argument in favor of it. The problem in part is that the debate, because there are so many different kind of forms of it, the debate gets confusing. And so I want to talk a little bit about some of the forms that are going to be debated this year so you can understand as you hear these things come up what people are kind of talking about, right? So there is a form of school choice called public to public school choice. You'll sometimes hear people call it open enrollment. You'll sometimes hear people call it portability. All that really means is that you allow a kid who is in a public school in the community that they live in, so the public school that they're assigned to, you allow to go to another public school outside the district in which they live. So it literally is going from one public school to another public school. Mississippi already has open. They all have sort of different systems with the way that open enrollment works. So in Mississippi right now, if a kid wants to transfer from one public school to another public school, they need the permission of the school that they're currently in, the sending school, and they need the permission of the school that they want to go to, the receiving school of the child. What the proposal that came out of the Senate does yesterday, or came out of Senate Education yesterday, all it really does is to say that the school that the child is leaving, that sending school, no longer has veto power, right? So it is entirely up to the receiving school as to whether or not to take the kid, and the school the kid wants to leave can't hold that kid hostage. That's literally all that bill does. And so there's been a lot of controversy around that bill already. and a lot of confusion. Like, I think people are treating it like it's private school choice, which it's not. But when people talk about open enrollment or public to public or portability, what they're talking about, or what they're going to be talking about this session, is this idea that you no longer have both schools required to get permission. Now, what that doesn't mean is that the school the kid wants to go to has to take the kid. That school can still determine whether or not they've got the capacity, whether or not they've got the resources. All of that's still on the table. So you're not talking about forcing districts into overcrowding, anything like that. That's the essence of the open enrollment discussion. Then there are other types of school choice. So like charter schools is an example. Sometimes people think of charter schools as being a private school. It's not. A charter school is a publicly managed, publicly funded public school. The original concept around charter schools, and you saw it really blow up in like Washington, D.C. and New Orleans and some of these other places. The original concept really was that they were going to create schools that had less regulation. They were going to still be public schools, but they had more freedom to innovate, come up with different ways to do things, maybe take kids that were struggling at the public school where they live, and then put them into a different setting. And the way Mississippi's law was drafted, it was drafted in a way where really that can only happen in really poorly performing districts. So you only have a few districts that have taken advantage of trying to open a charter school. And the way that it's been regulated through the charter school board it's made it hard for there to be very many of them. So there are not a ton of them in Mississippi. Another form of school choice is a tax credit. So a tax credit is literally a private company or a private individual writes a check to a private school for a scholarship. And they basically fund a scholarship. And in exchange for funding that scholarship, that individual or that company gets a tax credit for funding that scholarship. Pretty simple. It's really hard to run a tax credit program in a state like Mississippi because we just don't have the corporate resources that some other states that have big tax credit programs have. Florida's got a huge tax credit program, tax credit scholarship program. It's really hard to run something like that in Mississippi. So the final sort of like big school choice piece, and this is really what you hear when you hear like Donald Trump talk about school choice, or when you hear people talk about Arkansas school choice program with Sarah Huckabee Sanders, or Jeff Landry's Gators scholarship program in Louisiana, or the program that just passed in Texas under Texas Governor Greg Abbott, Kay Ivey in Alabama, Ron DeSantis in Florida, Bill Lee in Tennessee. Those governors have all sort of led on a ESA program, an education savings account program. Sometimes people refer to these as vouchers. It's actually a little different than a voucher. A voucher is like literally a coupon to attend a specific school. An ESA, though, is different in that it is set up as an account that a family gets, and it's funded with the exact same allotment or amount of money that the child is already allotted under state law, under the state funding formula. And essentially then that family has the ability to pay for tuition if they want to at a private school, but they also have the flexibility to use those funds on tutors and all sorts of approved programming. And so it's something more than what people somehow or often refer to as vouchers. And so ESAs are like the big thing. Like if you're talking to a school choice guy or gal, they're going to tell you that the big goal is an education savings account because it affects more students. It gives more students the option to be able to move if they feel like the setting they're currently in is not working for them. And so we already in Mississippi have a very small ESA program for children with special needs that's been in operation, I think, since 2015, maybe 2016. And so that is already existing on a very small scale. We also have a dyslexia scholarship program that's on a very small scale. But the idea that you're going to see out of the Mississippi House of Representatives, they've got a lot of these different pieces kind of stacked on top of each other. But the big component piece is the creation of an ESA program that is first eligible to people who are low income and then becomes eligible to basically everybody on top of that after the low income students get their preference. So I share all of that, and I'll take a break, but I share all of that to kind of give you a sense of when you hear the word school choice, it's not one thing. And so if you're hearing a debate about school choice, it's important that you ask questions to figure out, well, are you talking about open enrollment, that public-to-public piece? Are you talking about a tax credit? Are you talking about more charter schools? Are you talking about an ESA? Are you talking about all of those things combined? Because the debate gets really muddy and really muddled if you don't figure out that piece of it. There are pros and cons that are associated with each one of those pieces that look very different. You're listening to The Sit Down right here with Russ Latino on MPB Think Radio. We're going to take a break. We will come back and wrap up this discussion as we begin the 2026 legislative session. We'll be right back.
Everlasting, the Legacy Podcast, is a companion podcast to Mississippi Public Broadcasting's documentary Everlasting, Life and Legacy of Medgar Evers. Join me, Rita Brent, as we dive deeper into the story with exclusive interviews and conversations about the enduring legacy of Medgar Evers. Everlasting, the Legacy Podcast, available on the MPB app or wherever you get your podcasts. MPB, your stories, our mission.
You're listening to Sit Down right here on MPB Think Radio. I'm your host, Russ Latino. We're joined in the first segment today by Blake Levine as we prepare for Ole Miss's college football semifinal game against Miami. I know that much of the state of Mississippi is going to be rooting for the Rebels, even maybe some Bulldog and Golden Eagles fans. It is a rare deal to have a team that deep in the playoffs. Oh, it's a rare deal to have a team in the playoffs from Mississippi. So it's a cool opportunity for Mississippi to get a lot of good press, a lot of good notoriety. And I was also very glad to have my friend Daniel Sparks join us. He's done a lot of good work around PERS. Before the break, we were talking about this issue of school choice, and I was trying my best to explain it in objective terms to the extent that I was trying to explain the different forms of school choice. I think that you're going to hear arguments for and against it. A lot of those arguments are going to be conclusory during the course of the session. I would encourage you to think critically. I just would encourage you not to accept at face value even well-meaning statements, because on these types of issues, when emotions get involved, what happens is that people sort of gravitate towards folks that they already like, people that gravitate towards folks they already trust, and oftentimes you end up repeating things not maliciously, and not because the original speaker thought he or she was lying, but they're just inaccurate because of confusion around what some of these things do. And so I think it's really important on an issue like this, if you're going to engage, to try and understand it deeply, regardless of which way you end up coming out on it. I will say this, the feedback on the bill that came out of the Senate yesterday, which is really a really vanilla, I don't want to say do nothing bill, because that's not fair. It does something, right? Like, it makes it easier for a kid to transfer from one district to the next by removing the veto power of the sitting school. But that bill is not a big bill. It's not a bill that's going to have thousands of kids transferring between public school districts. It's not a bill that probably will have hundreds of kids transferring between public school districts. It's important to remember, too, you got 440,000 kids in the K-12 public school system in Mississippi. So if you're talking about a few hundred kids that avail themselves of the opportunity to go to a different public school, and the public school that they go to wants that kid, they've got room for that kid, they've got resources for that kid, you're not talking about some big life-changing thing, maybe for that individual student, but not for the system. The system's not going to be broken over that. And so just bear in mind the scale of some of these things. Even the ESA program that I was mentioning, right? That's the House's ESA program. I think it's like 6,250 kids in public schools in the first year under the bill that got released today. That is, 1.5% of the 440,000 kids in K-12 that are currently in K-12. And so you stop and you take a deep breath and you go, why are we panicking over this? Why are we panicking over the idea of potentially giving a few families, 1.5% of the kids in the system, the potential that they might be able to move to a different school if it meets their needs? And in that context, maybe just take it down a notch. But I will say that some of the rhetoric around the open enrollment bill, that public to public bill, has been really disappointing. And disappointing in this sense that, like, last year when that same bill got proposed in the House, or a version of that bill got proposed in the Mississippi House, there were cards handed out by Madison County schools to parents at PTO meetings that suggested that if that bill passed, if you remove the veto power of the sending school, that it would hurt the culture and property values of Madison County, right? Or of the schools in Madison County, the communities in Madison County. And they're not the only ones that use this kind of language. And I don't think that they were trying to harken back to segregation, but it's very similar language to the language that was used during segregation. And I think we just need to be very careful that we don't fall into the trap of thinking that a kid whose parents are going to take the extraordinary step of transporting them to school every day so that they have a new opportunity is going to somehow negatively impact the school that they're going to. That kid's family is bought in. That kid's family is looking for another option. That kid's family has recognized a need. And so it's not a passive exercise. It is a very intentional exercise to be able to pull something like that off. And I think we just need to be mindful of that as we consider the potential implications or how we talk about these things. But at the end of the day, the goal of public education, the goal of taxpayers giving public money, is to prepare every kid for their life, right? To make sure that every single kid in Mississippi has the best possible chance of being successful. And that doesn't mean that every kid will be, like, right? Some kids are just not going to make the choice to be disciplined enough. Some kids don't have the family support to be able to do that. Some kids have real world distractions that make it hard. And I get all of that. But if you're going to make an investment in a system, you want to make sure that it is the best possible chance for as many kids as humanly possible for them to be prepared and successful at life. And if you look at the system, and this is Russ's opinion, but if you look at the system, in my opinion, there's no way that you can say with a straight face that 100% of the time, the school where the kid happens to live is the best possible option for the kid. It might be the best possible option 95% of the time, right? There are great public schools. There are great public school teachers. I'm a product of public school. My kids go to public school. My wife is on the PTO. Like, we do all of these things. And so I recognize the tremendous value that public schools create. I also recognize that there are kids in public schools today that would be better served somewhere else, a different public school, a private school, wherever. I recognize that there are kids that are in private school that might be better served in a different school, right? And so our goal, to the extent we're going to do a taxpayer investment in something, should be to make sure that the dollars that we allot prepare the kid as best as possible. We shouldn't be worried about brick and mortar institutions and all that. And here's the other thing, like, sometimes this gets billed as some sort of knock on teachers or something that would hurt teachers. The reality is they're going to be the same number of students that have to be educated regardless. Whether they're in a different public school, a different private school, wherever they are, it's going to be the exact same number of students that need teachers. So the need for teachers doesn't go away at all by creating competition and options. And I think that's important as teachers in particular hear some of the conversation around this topic. It's going to be an important one. We're going to have more people on. I want to hear from people who disagree with me, right? Like, I want to hear from callers who disagree with me. I want to have guests on that disagree with me. I want to have real debate, because I think these are the types of important issues that can shape a state. These are the type of important issues that we want to have real dialogue on. And so as we head into this session, my commitment on this show is that we're going to have real, genuine debate that is not focused on talking points, that gets deep enough that the people who are listening can understand and either agree or disagree with what we're saying. Germaine, how was your new year?
Man, I mean, after all of that, it's pretty good. After you tackled all of that, this show, this first episode back in 2026, I'm not doing too bad. You got
to hit the ground running, right?
A little under the weather, but I have as much as I can.
Yeah, no, look,
How was yours?
I spent Christmas break with the flu, and my daughter had the flu.
You've wired it to me somehow.
An awful lot of fun.
You've wired the flu to me somehow.
Oh, do you have it?
No, I don't have the flu, but I am like, my sinuses are messed up. But that's how the new year went. It was like cold, hot, and we're back to work.
So, I got to say, I'll be back in studio next week, but it's been pretty nice to do this from the house. People are watching.
Your setup is nice.
People are watching on video. We've got my Ole Miss Homer gear behind me.
I see.
You can see the presidential biographies I read.
There's encyclopedias over there.
Oh, no, that's a set of biblical commentaries.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if that makes it better or worse, but that's what that is.
I love it. Seeing you at the house is great, but seeing you here is even better at 4 p.m.
We'll be back, and we'll
4
be
p.m.
back with
Wednesdays.
a new time slot.
That's right. We're back. 4 p.m. Wednesdays next week.
Very good. Germaine, I have missed you.
Yes.
And I have missed doing the show, and we're gonna hit the ground running.
That's right. I'm ready for that. I'll see you next week in person.
So you have been listening to The Sit Down right here on Mississippi Public Broadcasting Think Radio. We appreciate our listeners. We would ask you if you like the program, if you like programs like The Sit Down, other programs that come on the Think Radio weekly, to consider making a contribution. You can do that at MPB Online. Is it .org or .com?
.org.
.org.
That's it.
MPBOnline.org. You can sign up to follow what we're doing. Germaine is always wonderful in the booth, even when I can't see her, producing the show. For my guests, Blake Levine and Daniel Sparks, Senator from Senate District 5, I'm Russ Latino. We will be back with a new episode of Sit Down next Wednesday at 4 p.m. I'll be in studio. Thanks for listening.